welcome, and I'm going to be discussing the very new important topic, the role of cholesterol in autism tonight. And the discovery of cholesterol started with observations on a rare genetic disease called SLOS. And I want to say right at the very beginning, if your child doesn't have this rare genetic disease, you can benefit from this seminar. Don't think because you don't have this rare genetic disease, this doesn't apply to you. This applies to most people who have a child, whether a small child or an adult child or patient with autism. And so we're going to talk about this discovery because it's very important in demonstrating the great importance of cholesterol as an essential element in our diet. I'm going to talk about why cholesterol is so important to the brain. I'm going to discuss in great detail why cholesterol deficiency is very important in regular autism, meaning most of a majority of people with autism. And I'm going to be talking about how other factors such as serotonin and oxytocin and other factors are influenced by low cholesterol. So I'm starting off with the description of this genetic disease that has the acronym SLOS, which is like many diseases like Parkinson's or Alzheimer's disease was named by the physician who discovered it. In this case, the SLOS is Smith-Lemli-Opitz, and the last S stands for syndrome. And the critical breakthrough in the understanding of this disease was finding that virtually all of the people with this disease who had similar symptoms had extremely low cholesterol, some actually having zero cholesterol. And when I'm using the term cholesterol, I'm talking about the total amount of cholesterol. The total amount is the so-called good and the so-called bad, and any other type all combined together. So that's when I say cholesterol, I'm talking about all the cholesterol of all types. It was also found in this disease, SLOS, that the individuals had a unique finding in that they had high amounts of the substance that produces cholesterol called 7-dehydrocholesterol. And the other thing that got my attention and led me to focus on this disease was the fact that 75% of the individuals who had this disorder were on the autistic spectrum. So I thought that this indeed, a knowledge of this particular syndrome might shed light on what's happening in regular autism. One of the things that's unique and helps to give this away, if the individual has autism and also has the second and third toes joined together to form the letter Y, then that would make it much more likely that a person with autism might also have this SLOS. The characteristics of SLOS are very similar to all individuals with autism and might be, and in most cases would be thought of as relatively severe autism. But just like in regular autism, there's a wide variation in functioning. So there can be complete lack of speech, severe behavior abnormalities, frequent temper tantrums, hyperactivity, violent outbursts, destruction of property, self-hurtful behaviors. That one of the unique things about this SLOS is that the fact that the individuals have ultraviolet light sensitivity. That's something that most people with autism do not have. So if the individual has this, it's caused blisters on the skin if the person is exposed to light for a short period of time. These children here have have the characteristics of SLOS. And can you see the pointer? You can see the pointer? Okay. The previous software version, you couldn't see the pointer, but I understand with this version you can see the pointer. So one of the things I want to show you is, in these children, these are two brothers who have this illness. They have these circles around the eyes that are called epicanthal folds. So you hear and hear, and also in the brother, although not as pronounced in the brother. The nose is shorter than usual, and the chin is somewhat small. So these are the characteristic facial features. So they're not huge differences in appearance, but they are characteristics. Now, for example, Oriental people may have these folds around the eye, but of course, all Oriental people have these, so they don't have SLOS. But one unique thing is this Y-shaped toe. So virtually everybody who has SLOS has this Y-shaped toe, but there are some people who have a Y-shaped toe who don't have SLOS. So for example, my secretary was preparing handouts and was making copies of slides, and all of a sudden she started yelling, "That's my toe," and ended up my secretary has this Y-shaped toe, and it always caused her a lot of consternation when she was growing up, being different than the other children, but she does not have SLOS and has a normal amount of cholesterol. So other factors could also cause this Y-shaped toe, although more than likely people who have this may have some impairment in a nearby metabolic pathway. Now I want to turn to what the cholesterol values are in SLOS. So what we have here is a list of the total cholesterol, is many times just referred to as just cholesterol. So those are the two things. Most of the time, if you look at a lab report, it'll just say cholesterol, not it won't say total, but I put in here for clarification. So this is a list of 16 people with SLOS, and I wanted to show that there's a very substantial range in values from a value of 8, an extremely low value, to a value of 142. This value of 142 is probably found in a number of people who are listening in the audience tonight. So 142 is a fairly high value. But what this demonstrates is that values of 142 or less are capable of causing severely abnormal kinds of biochemistry. And based on this particular chart, I plotted these values in a bar graph type of form, and if you look here at the top, this indicates values that are less than 160, and a little bit later on I'll tell you why I chose this value of 160 as a cutoff value. But if you look at all the values in children with this SLOS, 100% of them have values less than 160. So what this indicates is that low cholesterol is not something that is always good, that low cholesterol can be bad, that having low cholesterol may make you have a severe developmental disorder. The other thing that is very important is this particular study shows that 50% of the children with the SLOS had the extremely low cholesterol. So a very high number with cholesterol less than 100. And all of these values are in milligrams per deciliter. Those are the most common units in the United States. If you live in Europe, you'll have to make modifications, conversion factors to compare these two. But in the United States, virtually all laboratories use the values of milligrams per deciliter, and it's pretty much throughout North and South America. But in Europe and in other countries, there are other units, most commonly moles instead of milligrams. So after looking at children with SLOS, I did a study of children on the autistic spectrum, and I looked at their cholesterol values and compared them to the children with SLOS. And what I found is that nearly 58% of individuals with autism had low cholesterol, defined as cholesterol less than 160, and that 17.5% had extremely low cholesterol, meaning cholesterol less than 100. And so what this indicates is that values in regular autism, I'm not talking about I'm talking about just plain autistic spectrum disorder, are very low. So what I did is compared them to a national nutrition survey, which is called NHANES. And this is kind of interesting to me because I worked for this NHANES project. This was my first job after getting my PhD, and it was a very large study involving many tens of thousands of people that were tested throughout the United States to determine what normal biochemical and nutritional values are for the entire population, all ages, races, and sexes. And what I did is I compared the values in children with autism to the normal values for both age and sex, and compared them to the 5th percentile, which would be the extremely lowest values. So in this study, I evaluated 40 individuals. So 5% should be, 2 people should be below the 5th percentile based on age and sex if the distribution of values in autism was the same as the normal population. Instead, in this autism spectrum group, 14 of these individuals, or 35%, were below the 5th percentile of this national study of normal values that was done in the United States. And this is comparing the individual with autism to the person of the same sex and the same age. And when you do that, what that indicates is that the rate of deficiency of cholesterol is 7 times higher in autism compared to the population in the United States. A study was done at Johns Hopkins, and they measured cholesterol using GCMS, and they found values that were extremely similar to that of Great Plains. They found that 19 of the 100 samples, or 19%, had total cholesterol less than 100 milligrams per deciliter, compared to 17.5% in the Great Plains study. So virtually identical results, which helps to indicate that these abnormalities are very significant. The fact that these 2 studies found the virtually identical data. And knowing this, we also went into a joint study with a gastroenterologist in Venezuela, Dr. Lenny Gonzalez, and looked at cholesterol values in Venezuela. And in Venezuela, 67%, or 2/3 of the population there had low cholesterol using this cutoff value of 160. So now I want to turn to where cholesterol comes from. So cholesterol comes from 2 main sources. We can get it already pre-built. So that would be, the analogy would be, you could buy a car already assembled, or you could buy the 5,000 pieces of the car and then put them all together. So, and the way the body handles cholesterol is about half the cholesterol that the body gets is in the diet, and the other half it makes from pieces of other molecules that it sticks together, making completely new cholesterol. So roughly 50%. And this will vary from individual to individual. So, but overall, it would be about 50%. So the body can take essentially any foodstuff, whether it's fats, carbohydrates, or proteins, and break it down into 2 carbon units called that are transported by a CoA molecule, and these 2 carbon units are called acetyl-CoA. The acetyl-CoA then undergoes a large number of biochemical transformations, converting it to linosterol, then to dehydrocholesterol, the 7-dehydrocholesterol, which is the compound that's elevated in SLOS, and the final step is the conversion to cholesterol. Altogether, there's about 25 or so biochemical steps. So I've greatly simplified this just to give you the overall viewpoint. This particular slide also shows the great importance of cholesterol to our biochemistry. So cholesterol plays a pivotal role in many different factors in the body, but one of the most important is our hormone system, our endocrine system. So cholesterol is important for making estrogens, testosterone, cortisol, aldosterone. So estrogens and testosterone, of course, sexual changes. Cortisol is the molecule involved in when you're under stress, and aldosterone helps you to regulate the minerals, the sodium and potassium, so to keep an even balance in your body. In addition, cholesterol is also important for making bile salts that help us to absorb fat and digest fat. Without bile salts, we cannot absorb fats very effectively. In addition, the bile salts also help us with the absorption of fat-soluble vitamins like vitamin D and vitamin A and vitamin E. So very important functions for cholesterol. And some of the most important are ones that many people don't know about. And some of the most important is the fact that cholesterol is needed to activate the receptors for very important hormones. So for example, cholesterol activates the receptors for oxytocin. Oxytocin is the molecule that's involved with forming social bonds. So you could see, since many children with autism have inabilities in this area, that this could be a very important aspect, to not having this molecule function well if there was not adequate cholesterol. And the second thing is the activation of a very important protein with the odd name of sonic hedgehog. And I'll be explaining all of these in greater detail in just a little bit. But suffice it to say that the sonic hedgehog is an extremely important protein in development of our toes and fingers, but also extremely important in brain development. And if you look up here, and sometimes the slide projector just goes one screen ahead, and I have to backtrack. So cholesterol is involved in activating the G protein coupling of the serotonin receptor. So serotonin is the neurotransmitter that's involved in feelings of well-being and contentment and satisfaction and so forth. The other aspect I'd like to point out is that the vitamin D is also derived from the 7-dehydrocholesterol, which is in the near the end of the cholesterol synthesis pathway. So one study looked at how cholesterol, that supplementing with cholesterol could be helpful. So these are the values of cholesterol prior to supplementation, and what they did is they rated the severity of symptoms compared to the person's cholesterol value, and this one, these are not actually milligrams per deciliter. They just made the highest value 100 and the lowest value 0. So they scaled these values. So these are not milligrams per deciliter. They're high versus low. But the important thing here is that what this shows as the higher the person's cholesterol, the less severe symptoms. And conversely, the lower the person's cholesterol, the more severe symptoms they have. And many of these symptoms are the autistic symptoms. And this is in SLOS, but as I'll indicate later on, we're finding exactly the same kind of pattern in regular autism as well. So these are some of the benefits of cholesterol feeding in SLOS from a Dr. Kelly at Johns Hopkins. And so the children learned to walk better. Many of the children were just crawling. Even though they may have been 3 or 4 or 5, they still weren't walking. After cholesterol supplementation, they began to walk. And the cholesterol supplementation was 2 ways. They were even given either giving massive amounts of eggs or giving purified cholesterol. And in some cases, they were given many as 40 egg yolks a day. And I just want to make sure you heard that. That's 40. So because of this biochemical deficiency, many of these children had to get huge amounts of cholesterol supplement to increase their cholesterol toward normal values. And sometimes even with these massive values, the cholesterol in the blood serum was still below this the normal value. So the individuals who could walk but were able to run started to run. Many of the children were way behind in their growth curves, and some of them started to grow as much as 6 inches in a short period of time. So cholesterol is needed for growth as well. Another very important factor is many of these children were having one infection after the other, and once they started feeding them cholesterol, the amount of infections dropped off dramatically. They also found they had less of this ultraviolet light sensitivity, so they could go outside more. They were more and more alert. If they were doing self-hurtful behavior, this kind of behavior was stopping. Just like children with normal autism, some of them had tactile defensiveness, didn't like to be touched, and would push away if the parent was trying to hug them or something like that. They became much more social. The behavior improved. There were cases of adults who had not talked before who began to talk for the first time. So one of the people in the audience was saying, is this helpful for 10-year-olds? So in essence, this therapy can be used across the age spectrum. So to my knowledge, virtually everyone of any age will benefit from this treatment if they have low values. Those, as I mentioned, people with SLOS had wide range of symptoms. Some were verbal. The people who were verbal said that they felt much better, and more than likely that's due to the fact that cholesterol is activating those serotonin receptors that accept the serotonin molecule, which causes feel-good feelings and behavior. The thing that was very remarkable is that many of these improvements occurred after only a few days. So even though it took a long time for the cholesterol value to rise up, the effects of the cholesterol supplementation were very fast. When in some cases, these adults who hadn't talked were talking within only a couple of days after supplementation. They had decreased irritability and had, many cases, had increased muscle tone. And low muscle tone is one of the common factors in people with autism. Really, what got my attention in here was the interactions with my own stepdaughter, and so a lot of this was theoretical, and until a series of circumstances happened that really got my attention. So, as you can see here, my stepdaughter Paulina is generally very happy and contented, even though she has severe autism, and this is even after she's done all the standard treatments, chelation and so forth, and they've helped very much, and she was very well adjusted, but still severely affected. But she liked very much going to school and everything else, and she was one of the favorite students in the special ed class that she goes to. And at the beginning of one school year, though, we started getting bad reports back from the teacher. Paulina doesn't seem very happy. Paulina is not smiling very much. Paulina doesn't want to participate in the activities, and that Paulina was very tired. And then one of the most bizarre things is that she wanted to go to bed earlier and earlier each day, until finally she got to the point where when she got off the school bus at 3 o'clock, the first thing she did was run up the stairs and get under the covers and go to sleep at 3 in the afternoon. And this was persisting day after day. And so we knew that something was wrong, but couldn't quite pinpoint it. So a couple of days later, I was going down to breakfast, and my wife was sitting there at the breakfast table, and she was crying, and she was sobbing to me that she thinks Paulina is dying, and that nobody knows what's causing her autism, and maybe that same thing is killing her, whatever that thing is, because she can't keep this up. You know, that if she can't even stay awake during the day, that means that was a very bad sign. So Paulina had tons of lab testing done, of course, because I work at Great Plains Laboratory. You know, she has a set of lab results like about the size of the Manhattan Yellow Pages. And so I told my wife that I would go through all the results and see if I could find some clue to what might be going on. And what I found is that right about the time that Paulina first started having problems, she had a food allergy, an IgG food allergy test done, and it showed that she was allergic to eggs. And so I asked my wife, I knew that Paulina used to eat eggs a lot, so I said, did you take the eggs out of the diet, out of her diet when you saw this food allergy results? She hadn't talked about that to me, but she said, yeah, I did. And it was right before the beginning of the school year. And so I said, bingo, that's what the problem is. She has cholesterol deficiency. And even though she's allergic to eggs and eggs upset her stomach, we started giving her the eggs again. And within only 2 days, all her energy was back. She was staying up to the same time. She always stayed up. And the reports in school went back to the way they were before. So everything was working well. So that was very dramatic for me, and seeing how important cholesterol is for overall function. So I wanted to see what would happen with cholesterol supplementation versus supplementing with pure cholesterol versus supplementing with eggs. So in the first case, it involved a neurologist administering cholesterol supplements to a 17-year-old girl with autism who also had a problem with severe anxiety. In addition, she had not started puberty, even though she was 5 or 6 years past the age in which puberty occurs, and she had not had normal menstrual periods, and she had no menstrual periods at all, and in addition, she had had hormone treatments that were unsuccessful in inducing menstrual cycles, but following the cholesterol supplementation, her menstrual cycles began shortly thereafter, and her anxiety dropped back to completely went away. Another case, a woman called to say her son is significantly less aggressive when just taking 250 milligrams of a cholesterol supplement. He stopped headbanging and being aggressive toward others, and just after a couple of months on supplementation, her son started to spell for the first time. She stopped it for just 1 week to see if to verify that the cholesterol was the problem, and all the bad behavior and aggressiveness started again. She went back on cholesterol, the problem disappeared. So in a third case, the parent indicates that her son's cholesterol level went up to 131 after taking supplements of pure cholesterol. She indicates he's improving wonderfully, and babbling is back, and he's watching her lips when she talks to him. He understands and follows verbal commands much better. He got used to giving himself a drink from a cup where she had to be using a bottle, and he learned to climb up the stairs and feed himself with a spoon. He's much happier. He smiles and laughs with people. And she indicates that when he was 12 months old, that she says that her son wouldn't even qualify as being autistic. She would say he was catatonic. So she's very happy with the results. Then in the fourth case, the parent reports that her son's cholesterol value was 106, the lowest her DAN doctor had seen, and he's doing much better with making eye contact and contacting with me. By the way, we've seen some individuals with values as low, with autism, with values as low as 30 milligrams per deciliter, with the normal be considered 200. Another case, the cholesterol supplements raised her son's cholesterol from 117 to 159, and she was giving 5 capsules a day, which is equal to 1,250 milligrams of cholesterol a day, and had a dramatic decrease in his aggression overnight after starting it. His teachers and therapists all asked what she was doing, and in order to see such dramatic changes, and the thing is that she felt that she could not give her child that much cholesterol anyway. So how fast does cholesterol go up? So I'm going to show some values, and these are in the European version values. So I've plotted, if over here I have an arrow indicating the line that's approximately 100. So you can see the child started out, this is a child with SLOS, started out with a value maybe around 30 or so, and it took nearly a year to get close to 100, and actually it took almost 3 years just to get up to 100, and this is after giving very large amounts of cholesterol. So what's surprising is how slow cholesterol values go up. As a matter of fact, if you measured your child's cholesterol and then gave them 5 or 10 capsules, you probably wouldn't even see an increase. If you measured it like 2 hours after he ate this, you probably would see very little change in the cholesterol within the same day. This is the thing you would see changes over a period of weeks or months. So where did I come up with this value of 160? So this is one of the reasons. So this was a study from the 18th International Congress on Clinical Chemistry, and what they did is they looked at child mortality in different countries in comparison to the average child's serum cholesterol value. And what you see up here is that the country that has the very highest child mortality rate, around 150, the average cholesterol value is extremely low, maybe about 125 or so. And then as cholesterol increases, you see the child mortality rate decreases significantly, and when the value reaches 160, the child mortality rate becomes extremely low. So there's a dramatic increase in child death when cholesterol goes below 160. And I think this was one of the reasons that there was many more infectious diseases in the past, that even though high cholesterol is sometimes attacked now, I think by having a good diet with a lot of eggs and protein containing cholesterol and so forth, it greatly boosted immunity, so that much of infectious disease, the drop-off of death rate from infectious disease probably is to a large extent due to a nutrition, and partially due to this increase in cholesterol. As a matter of fact, you can see as cholesterol continues to increase that the death rate drops further, with the lowest death rate with the cholesterol value around 190. So the healthiest cholesterol as far as child mortality appears to be a cholesterol value of 190. And the other thing, though, is that you see when the cholesterol value drops below 160, there's a marked increase in mortality. So that's one of the reasons for choosing this value of 160, but there's many more reasons. So why is cholesterol important? In addition to those things that I showed at the beginning, hormones and activating receptors, the big thing is that it serves as a structural element in our body, and particularly in the brain. So about 70% of the cholesterol in the brain is associated with myelin, the material that insulates the nerve cells in the brain. And about half of the white matter in the brain is composed of myelin. The brain is the most cholesterol-rich organ in the body. And the brain concentrates cholesterol because it needs it in order to function. The brain just does not function well unless there's adequate cholesterol. So the concentration of cholesterol in the brain, and particularly in myelin, is consistent with an essential function related to its membrane properties. So this is showing a typical nerve cell or neuron. So here we have dendrites. These are the part of the nerve that receives signal. Here's the nucleus where the DNA is. And this is the axon that conducts the nerve signal. And the conduction of this nerve signal is accelerated by this insulating material called myelin, which is very rich in cholesterol. And by having this myelin, the nerve signal goes much faster and more efficiently. It's less likely to get short-circuited. The cholesterol is also found in the cell membranes. The cell membranes consist of protein and fatty acids, and the cholesterol, which looks like this chicken wire type of molecule, is dissolved in the cell membrane. So here are some other things. These are other independent articles, and this is just a small sample of these. All of these references are on the Great Plains website. So I'm not putting them here, but you have access to them. And if you want, you can take those references and look up all of these articles on the NIH website, the Library of Congress website. You can get the summaries of these and sometimes the whole article. Some of these are free, the entire article. But you can get the references in the cholesterol section of the Great Plains website. And so each of these studies was looking at cholesterol values. The vast majority of these were using a cutoff of 160. So these were the things that they found when cholesterol was less than 160. Increased cancer, increased violent behavior and aggression. As a matter of fact, in one case, there was an entire family that had low cholesterol, and there were multiple violent suicides and homicides for several generations in the family that had extremely low cholesterol. There is increased susceptibility to infection. So the tuberculosis was very common when cholesterol was less than 160. Also, gastrointestinal infections are more prevalent when cholesterol is low. It's been found there was increased anxiety and suicides. There were studies that have shown increased depression and bipolar disorder. In individuals who are older than 70, those who have low cholesterol have double the chance of dying than individuals who have high cholesterol, meaning I believe it was greater than 260. So rather than cholesterol being, high cholesterol being bad, when you're older than 70, you actually have a greater chance of living longer if you have higher cholesterol. It's been found that low cholesterol is associated with increased stroke rates, increased rates of cataracts of the eyes. Another study found a significant increase in children suspended from school for bad behavior being associated with low cholesterol. It's been found that having low cholesterol prevents you from kicking drug addiction. Individuals who had very low cholesterol had great difficulty in being able to get off of their cocaine addiction. It's also been found that if you have low cholesterol, that your mental processing speed is dramatically decreased. And another study found that if you had low cholesterol, you're much more likely to have a car wreck. And that's probably because your reflexes are shot. You can't conduct those nerve signals if you don't have adequate amount of cholesterol in the myelin. So now I want to get into the business of the sonic hedgehog and how this relates to brain function. So this is the hedgehog, a mammal that has kind of prickly things like a porcupine, and this is the sonic hedgehog, which is a video game character, and this is the cartoon character is what this mutation was named after. This mutation altered brain development, and it was first discovered in a fruit fly, an experimental genetics animal that is used for genetics experiment, and it was found that fruit fly had abnormal bristles that resembled the hedgehog. So then they found a new mutant whose whose development was even more severely impaired, so they called that one the sonic hedgehog. So the sonic hedgehog is a protein that plays an important role in developmental patterning, especially of the nervous system and the skeletal system. So that's why if it's not functioning correctly, that you have these abnormal toes or maybe abnormal numbers of fingers and so forth. But it's also important for the proliferation of stem cells, and one of the most important things are the blood cells, but also the brain cells. So the sonic hedgehog is needed to get these stem cells that produce new brain cells going. It also is very important in the development of immunity. Immunity, the T cells in the body, one of the major factors in providing immunity for us are derived from the thymus. So the sonic hedgehog stimulates the development of these T cells in the thymus. It also regulates the CD4 T cells, a particular subtype of T cell. This is the one that is infected by the AIDS virus. So when these become too low, the person with HIV dies. So it's very important for the sonic hedgehog to be having this. As a matter of fact, I thought that one possibility might be that increasing cholesterol might be beneficial to people with HIV and helping to stimulate the number of these CD4 cells. Some of the mutations in this gene cause a severe brain disorder that also causes cleft lip and palate, and having just a single tooth in the middle of the palate. And other mutations are lighter, and they only cause behavioral disorder like ADD. Now, I want to show the importance of cholesterol in the activations of this sonic hedgehog protein. So for every protein, there's a gene inside the nucleus that has a code for this particular protein. So the code is translated into a protein. It's abbreviated the sonic hedgehog as SHH. And this protein is completely inactive until it reacts with cholesterol. Cholesterol then makes the sonic hedgehog protein active so that it can then perform all its important developmental functions, the development of the brain and the skeleton and the immune system and so forth. Transitioning from the sonic hedgehog, I want to talk about other factors that are involved in cholesterol transport. So one of these factors is called a lipoprotein. And lipoprotein are made of lipid, which means fat, and protein combining. So this is an artist's representation. The protein is indicated by this red material, and inside are these balls with a long strand. These are fats or lipids. So these things are combined in this lipoprotein. And the part of the protein that's just the protein itself is called apolipoprotein. So that just means the protein without the fat part attached to it. In the human body, the main apolipoproteins are called A, B, C, E, and these are large letters. So it's important to know that the terminology uses both large letters and small letters, and so the little a is a different lipoprotein than the big A. So that's something you need to know if you're looking at these things. So a very important study was done out at the Mind Institute with some other academics as well, other institutions, and they did one of the most comprehensive studies ever done of blood samples of individuals with autism. And they looked at a total of 6,348 of these proteins using the technique liquid chromatography mass spectrometry, which is abbreviated as LCMS. So they looked at more than these 6,000 proteins in 69 different children with autism, and amazingly, 6,344 of these proteins were pretty typical. So out of all of these proteins, there were only 4 of these proteins or peptides that were abnormal, and one of these that were abnormal was the protein that transports cholesterol, a very important one called Apolipoprotein B. And what was found is that the children who had the lowest values were the children who were most severely impaired and had low functioning autism. The other 3 proteins that were abnormal were related to the complement system and to blood clotting. So it's extremely interesting, and I think that this particular knowledge is going to be very important in deciphering the more information about the autism mystery. So these are the individual values of children in the study, and the black bar indicates the mean value in each of the groups. LFA stands for low functioning autism. So the group who were low functioning had the lowest value of this particular protein, the apolipoprotein. High functioning autism children had higher values, and normal or typical children had high values. So how do you get cholesterol? What are the high cholesterol foods? So first of all, you vegetarians in the audience are pretty much out of luck. There's really not any cholesterol with plants. It just doesn't, the high cholesterol foods are foods of animal origin. Of course, people who are vegetarians can make their own cholesterol, so they have that ability, but if they have an impairment in that, they're not going to be able to make adequate amounts of cholesterol without some proteins in the diet. So eggs are a major source of cholesterol, and virtually all of the cholesterol is in the yolk. So 2 egg yolks and an average size eggs have 500 milligrams. In addition, the brain is one of the highest sources of cholesterol, and it's because the cholesterol is so critical to brain function that all animals have high amounts of cholesterol in the brain. And even though that's not a common food in the United States, in other countries in Latin America, brain is a very popular food, and so that can serve as a source of cholesterol. And liver of all types also is a substance that has very high cholesterol. I'm sure that many of you out there are saying, what about this good cholesterol and the bad cholesterol? Well, how do these fit in? Well, so I want to first to review what these things are. So the HDL cholesterol, HDL is the abbreviation for high density lipoprotein cholesterol. That's the one that's been called good. And you notice I put this in parenthesis. The LDL cholesterol, or low density lipoprotein, is called the bad cholesterol. But actually, as you'll see, this is a very good supplementation, because if you don't have enough LDL, your immunity is impaired, and so both forms of cholesterol are important. Why would your body go to use all kinds of energy and everything else for making this cholesterol if it was only bad? That doesn't make sense. And so these things that are names that are given to the public sometimes are gross oversimplification. So a study by Ronskoff at the Weston Price Foundation, he on the website, you see the Weston Price website, a very good source of information about cholesterol. And the so-called bad cholesterol helps to protect humans against infection. So deadly Staphylococcus bacteria produce endotoxins that can kill human cells, including the red blood cells, but it was found that this LDL cholesterol was able to prevent this attack of this endotoxin on the red blood cells, while the good cholesterol was unable to protect. So in this case, the bad cholesterol was good, the good cholesterol was bad. So another study found if men had low LDL cholesterol, they had much fewer white blood cells, which means impaired immunity, compared to men who had high amounts of the so-called bad cholesterol. Now, I want to talk about how important cholesterol is and how interference with cholesterol causes severe abnormalities. This is on the right. We have the Cyclops from Greek mythology, and here we have in the Greek islands a sheep with a Cyclops eye, and this is a real picture. The one in the middle is a fake picture, so this is just some editing. But the sheep on the left is a true Cyclops sheep, and the reason that the sheep developed this because there were herbs or plants that grew on this island that contain a compound that has a very similar structure to cholesterol and interfered with cholesterol metabolism. And this compound is called cyclopamine. And if you look here at the structure and then compare that to, so the cyclopamine is here on the left, here is cholesterol on the right, and you see the biochemical structure of these things is extremely similar. And of course, what a lot of people think is that this was an evolutionary kind of thing, is that the plant, in order to prevent being eaten by animals, makes up all these terrible chemicals so that when animals eat it, they get sick or they die or they, and you can see if this causes all of these abnormal development, then this would be a big problem and the sheep would die out. So the name of the plant that produces this is called veratrum. I want to talk some more about the other factors that cause that are associated with the other diseases associated with low cholesterol. So this study in the journal Pediatric Research found that low cholesterol was associated with children having adjustment disorders and depression, and total cholesterol was significantly lower than normal children. And those children who had adjustment disorders had the lowest cholesterol. So those who had the biggest problems with adjustment or depression and suicidal tendencies had very low cholesterol. And it was also found that children who had problems with substance abuse were much more likely to have low cholesterol. So substance abuse was inversely related to cholesterol. In other words, the higher cholesterol, the less likely the child was to have problems with substance abuse. So if you have teenagers who have this particular problem, one of the first things you should do is go and get their cholesterol checked out. Another study that was done in one of the national hospitals in Mexico found that by giving a high cholesterol diet, that individuals got over pulmonary tuberculosis. Tuberculosis is caused by a bacteria that infects the lungs. And what's very interesting is that tuberculosis used to be rampant in the United States during the Depression. And even though there was never an immunization program to eradicate TB, TB essentially disappeared from the United States except for some very small percentage. And what I think was it was purely because during the Depression, eggs and meat and things like that, very high in cholesterol, were not available. And when at the end of the Depression, people had foods, animal protein again, that was high in cholesterol, and so the rate of tuberculosis dropped to almost to the point of disappearing. In recent years, tuberculosis is making a comeback, and I'm convinced that the reason is because of all the big emphasis on low cholesterol diet and saying eggs are bad and things like that. So it was found that low cholesterol is very common among tuberculosis patients, and that people who have low cholesterol are more likely to die from the tuberculosis. What's also very interesting is vegetarians also have much higher tuberculosis rate than people who are carnivorous. So sorry to my vegetarian friends that are listening, but unfortunately, vegetarianism has some very good things going for it, but a balanced diet, including meat and animal protein, can be very useful. So this particular slide shows the individuals recovering from the drug treatment, but one group was getting a high cholesterol diet and the other was getting a normal diet. The normal diet is in the white, the cholesterol high diet is in the black circles, and the individuals who were eating the high cholesterol diet with lots of eggs and so forth got well much faster than the individuals who were eating the normal diet. Another study found that in adults, the same thing was found as in the children who had psychiatric problems. So it was found that individuals who had low cholesterol were much more likely to attempt suicide than non-suicidal patients. And this was not influenced by any of the other factors. It wasn't related to age, sex, ethnicity, weight, disease severity, or physical health. When all of these were controlled for, the cholesterol value was still significant. So our findings imply that an association exists between low cholesterol, suicide, and depression. Again, the 160 value is where these things start happening. So based on this, I have come to the conclusion that the healthy cholesterol is really between 160 to 200 milligrams, and based on the child mortality rate, it really looked like, as far as death from infectious disease, that a value around close to 200 is the one that is most protective against infectious disease. So even a value of 160 may be too low as far as protection from infectious disease. So this is very relevant today with the H1N flu on the rise. So it'd be very interesting to see if the people who died were people who had low cholesterol. Another study that was reported in a newspaper in the UK reported a study of 124 people with Parkinson's, and they found that if the individual with Parkinson's, they found that people who had the low values of the bad cholesterol were 3 times more likely to have Parkinson's disease. So the bad cholesterol is helps you to not get Parkinson's disease. And more than likely, this has to do with cholesterol playing such an important role in the brain structure. A cartoon where the teacher is taking the bad kids down to the principal's office and saying, can she really have him throw us into a dank, dark dungeon where we won't see the light of day until we're old and gray? The long walk down to the principal's office. And what was found is the children making this walk were much more likely to be the children who have low cholesterol. So in non-African American children with serum cholesterol less than 145, they were almost 3 times more likely to have been kicked out of school compared to kids who had high cholesterol. Another study of cocaine addicts, and the black circles, filled in circles, are those that who have cholesterol higher than 160. Again, that number just crops up all the time, a very significant number. And the white circles are those with cholesterol less than 160, and the axis over here indicates the percent of non-relapses. In other words, they're staying clean. And so what you see is that after 3 months, virtually everybody in the program with high cholesterol was successful in staying clean, whereas there was a dramatic drop-off in the going back to the drug in individuals who had low cholesterol. So what this says to me is that in some ways that cocaine addiction may be self-medication because the individuals have low cholesterol. When they have low cholesterol, their brain cells don't function well, so they're looking for an external source of, they're looking for something that will make up for this, which is cocaine. What I think is that if there were adequate amounts of cholesterol, that the individual might not have chosen cocaine to begin with, because their brain would be functioning better, their brain would be firing better with the chemicals that are made natively in the brain. They wouldn't need external sources of this. And I think that this paper is extremely important because it opens up the potential for a new therapy for drug addiction, which is just supplementing with cholesterol. Rage, a great example of rage and aggression in this monkey. And it's been found that aggressive behavior and so forth is related to having adequate amounts of cholesterol in the diet. In this published study in Psychosomatic Medicine, monkeys that consumed a low cholesterol diet were more aggressive, less affiliative, so they didn't want to hang out with the other apes, and had lower amounts of the feel-good neurotransmitter serotonin in their cerebrospinal fluid than those that had high cholesterol. So high cholesterol makes you function better in society. And one of the reasons for this is because cholesterol stabilizes the serotonin receptors. So the low cholesterol causes reduced binding of the feel-good molecule serotonin to the serotonin 1A receptor. It impairs this G protein coupling and impairs the downstream signaling of these receptors. So these receptors are very important, and this is the thing that you really need to get out of this, which is that they play an important role in the brain and other organs, regulating temperature control, sleep, aggression, anxiety, and eating. All of these are regulated by these serotonin receptors. And a similar phenomena is found with oxytocin. So it's been found that cholesterol is needed to stabilize oxytocin receptors. So first of all, oxytocin is a hormone that is that's associated with bonding. Oxytocin is released in the mother during pregnancy, and also nursing continues to increase oxytocin. The release of oxytocin makes the mother become more and more bonded to the child, and the same thing takes place during sexual intercourse. At orgasm, there's a tremendous amount of oxytocin that is released that bonds the sexual couple together. So oxytocin is extremely important in social development, developing trust, and so forth. So a study was done on a group of 29 individuals with autism and 30 age-matched normal children. It was found that the autistic group had significantly lower amounts of oxytocin hormone compared to the normals, and that oxytocin increased with age in the normal individuals, but not in the children with autism. So one of the things that seemed obvious from this is that giving oxytocin might decrease the symptoms of autism, and that's exactly what's found. A number of the DAN physicians are now using oxytocin, and oxytocin is in the form of nasal spray and sublingual, and also in the form of pills that are absorbed. They have like a coating that keeps them from being digested quickly, and they're still able to have some of the oxytocin absorbed. So several different types of oxytocin available. Oxytocin was associated with higher scores on social and developmental measures. So the higher the oxytocin, the more social the child would. And the very lowest values were found in those children who were with autism who were considered the most aloof, the ones who did not want any kind of social interaction, who were always pushing away from the parents. So a study was done administering oxytocin. So summarizing, oxytocin stimulates uterine contractions, milk secretion, maternal bonding, and social interaction. So even though this mother-child thing is stressed, it really is involved in all social interactions are involved with the oxytocin release is playing a somewhat of a role in normal social interaction. So by administering oxytocin, some autistic adults reduced repetitive behaviors such as rocking and improved their ability to identify emotions such as anger and happiness and relate to people better. And both injections and nasal spray relieve symptoms for several weeks much better than in patients who received placebos. They did magnetic resonance imaging of the brains and found that oxytocin improved the regions of the brain that were impaired in autism. So another very important study. By the way, there are a number of compounding pharmacies that have oxytocin. You can Google this, and I would suggest that number one, you test your child for cholesterol, and if cholesterol is low and your child doesn't have good social interaction or is more aloof and doesn't show affection easily and so forth, that you consider doing this and talk to your physician about doing this, because all of these are available on these websites, but they all require a physician authorization. So the low cholesterol impairs oxytocin because without sufficient cholesterol, the oxytocin can't bind to its hormone receptors because these receptors are almost completely inactive without cholesterol. In addition, these oxytocin receptors rapidly fall apart. It's like the cholesterol is the glue that holds these receptors together. And if there's not enough cholesterol, these receptors fall apart. So even if the individual makes oxytocin, it doesn't work well. Cholesterol is also very important in having normal pregnancies. It was found that mothers who had low cholesterol were much more likely to have a preterm delivery, and they were also more likely to have children who weigh less and to also have abnormal head size. So all of these associated with low cholesterol. The Great Plains Laboratory has a very good cholesterol profile. The cholesterol we test is very similar to what you get in other laboratories, but of course the interpretation is different because very few laboratories know that low cholesterol is bad. So most laboratories only have an indication of high cholesterol. So in many laboratories throughout the world, you could have a cholesterol of 0 and the test would indicate that this is normal. So the Great Plains Laboratory checks for total cholesterol. It checks for these Apolipoproteins that are involved in the transport of cholesterol. And by the way, these are highly genetic factors. We've seen entire families where virtually the entire family has the low Apolipoproteins. So in this case, the low cholesterol is probably due to the individual not being able to transport the cholesterol. So it can be very useful to do this entire profile so that you can find out if these are possible genetic factors. In addition, we measure homocysteine, which is affected by folate and B12 deficiency and also plays a role in heart disease. This is covered by virtually all insurance companies. Of course, Great Plains is a provider for Blue Cross Blue Shield, so you get total coverage in most cases, not 100% if you have the PPO with Blue Cross. So to summarize, cholesterol is an essential nutrient. Although humans can make some, a deficiency of cholesterol is associated with preterm delivery and abnormal small head size. Low cholesterol leads to marked increase in infections of all types and to higher incidence of many psychiatric diseases and social ills. Optimum cholesterol appears to be between 160 and 200. When cholesterol goes way higher than 200, it's increases the risk of cardiovascular disease, although that relation seems to disappear once the person is 70. A higher cholesterol actually predicts a lower mortality rate. So having the cholesterol less than 200, reducing heart disease, is mainly a benefit for those who are middle-aged. Once you get to be older, the elevated cholesterol is not as big of a factor. So cholesterol less than 160 is associated with increased mortality, more car wrecks, more accidents, more suicides, and virtually every psychiatric disorder is associated with low cholesterol. Cholesterol is only available from animal sources. In 2 studies of autism, more than 50% of autistic spectrum disorder children were deficient, and of course the same thing applies to adults as well. In two studies done in 2 different institutions, a high percentage of individuals on the autistic spectrum were severely deficient, meaning less than 100 milligrams per deciliter. The Mind Institute study shows that cholesterol transport protein, Apolipoprotein B, is low in autism. The symptoms of autism and severe genetic disorder, SLOS, are reversed by high-dose cholesterol. And by high dose, we value supplements as high as 40 eggs a day. The benefits of cholesterol have now been seen in regular autism as well. So exactly the same kind of benefits seen in SLOS are being seen in regular individuals with autism. The sonic hedgehog protein, one of the most important proteins in human development and brain function, requires cholesterol to function. If there's not cholesterol, the sonic hedgehog does not work. Cholesterol is also needed for the social bonding hormone oxytocin, which is deficient in autism. Cholesterol is essential for the function of the feel-good neurotransmitter serotonin, and some work also indicates that it may be needed for the GABA aminobutyric acid neurotransmitter to function as well. Low cholesterol is associated with depression, aggression, and school suspension. A recent article that came out of the John Hopkins group indicates cholesterol ought to be considered as a helpful treatment approach while awaiting an improved understanding of cholesterol metabolism and ASD. And this group very recently was given a $1 million grant from Autism Speaks for a double-blind placebo-controlled study, which was for over a period of 3 years. So thank you very much.